Every puzzle has an answer.
What you are about to see is the strategy that an old man devised to defeat an opponent who could simply return in time and counterattack after being killed. Rom, the old man, had to sacrifice 500 soldiers to trap Aldebaran in a situation so hopeless that not even turning back time would help him escape. Welcome to the battle between Rom, the greatest human slayer, and Aldebaran, the most despised being in the world. After trapping Reinhard in an endless battle, Aldebaran takes a break in the forest. There, he hears Felt's voice. Hoping to gain an advantage, he updates his save point and goes to speak with the royal candidate. Although Felt is just a girl, Aldebaran does not underestimate her. After all, his late lady, whom he deeply respected, once considered her a worthy opponent. He tries to coax information out of her, saying that someone like him, who managed to deceive and surpass Reinhard, the strongest human alive, does not deserve this kind of trap. Unmoved, Felt reminds him that she and her 500 soldiers are not there to chat. Suddenly, a small shadow darts into the corner of Aldebaran's vision. It is Gracis, Flam's younger sister. She's the girl Aldebaran had to defeat to reach Reinhard. Although he only incapacitated her and didn't harm her, Gracis doesn't care. Despite her age, she has mastered Mana Flow and lands a solid kick to the traitor's neck. The impact rattles his helmet and brain. Aldebaran loses his balance, dropping to his knees as his strength drains away. Before losing consciousness, he bites into the emergency pill he always carries, a capsule filled with poison that will end his life instantly. As everything fades, Aldebaran feels his blood start to boil. He returns to the moment just before he hears Felt's voice in the forest. This time, he chooses not to go and avoids revealing his location. Even though the girl knows Aldebaran is in the area, she has no idea where exactly he is. Otherwise, she would have already sent her servant, Gracis, after him. As he considers what to do with his allies, Heinkel and Yai, Aldebaran suddenly notices a thick white smoke spreading through the forest. Aldebaran is forced to flee from the smoke in the opposite direction. He knows it's a trap, and someone is probably waiting for him at the end of the path. However, he has no other choice, so he curses his luck. With 500 enemies, he must account for countless variables at once. He would much prefer a one-on-one fight. To make matters worse, the smoke restricts their movements. While it won't kill them, it will cause general physical discomfort, which could become dangerous over time. Wanting to avoid this, Aldebaran orders his group to move in a straight line and cut down every tree in their way. As they begin to exit the forest, Aldebaran updates his save point. Suddenly, the smoke changes direction and begins to encircle the group. Aldebaran realizes it is time for battle. We switch to Rachens's point of view. He is waiting for Aldebaran on the other side. From his perspective, he sees someone hurling trees with such force that they look like cannonballs. After some trees land on his soldiers, he creates a powerful fire technique called Al-Goa and threatens to launch it toward the source of the falling trees. Encouraged by the display, his squad charges forward. Meanwhile, the person throwing the trees redirects their attacks toward the fireball. Aldebaran's group does not realize that the spell is a bluff. Though it appears massive and powerful, it is actually a weak fireball, stretched and visually exaggerated. The traitor's group falls for the trick and focuses all their attacks on this illusion, failing to stop the enemy soldiers from advancing. Just as the soldiers prepare to charge in, something strange happens. They are all stopped in their tracks. None of them can move, and they do not understand why. Suddenly, Yai appears, floating in midair. It is revealed that she used steel wires to immobilize the soldiers and is now standing atop one of them. Aldebaran orders that no one be killed, not out of pity, but because wounding them would force the enemy to waste resources healing the injured. Heinkel mocks Rachens, assuming he must be relieved to be spared. Rachens snaps back, telling Heinkel to shut the hell up. He cannot believe that someone who looks so much like the noble, red-haired knight of the kingdom could commit such atrocities. Aldebaran steps in, knowing the subject is sensitive for Heinkel. However, Rachens insults Aldebaran as well, calling him someone who does not know what it means to work toward his goals. It may seem like an empty insult, but the novel often hints at deeper things, like how Aldebaran once tried to be the brightest star in the sky, and failing that, has always carried a lingering sense of inadequacy. That Rachens would coincidentally say something that reminds him of this inner emptiness enrages Aldebaran and causes him to let down his guard. At that moment, a pig-faced man appears with his battle squad. He immediately punches the traitor with full force, but Yai softens the blow with her techniques, saving the traitor's life. She even managed to wrap steel wires around the pigman's arm to stop his punch. However, Doltero, the pigman, did not care. Even after being restrained, he increased the strength of his punch until he lost his arm. Aldebaran feels himself slipping into unconsciousness from the impact. Before he loses consciousness, he asks his ally to decapitate him with her steel wires. His new save point is now set when Heinkel sees the large fake fireball and, out of fear, throws fallen trees using Yae's steel threads. Aldebaran warns Heinkel that the fireball is fake and that there is no need to do that, but Heinkel ignores him and throws the trees anyway. Everything unfolds as it did in the previous loop. However, knowing that Doltero will attack if he remains on the tree branches, Aldebaran decides to change his position and stand next to Heinkel this time. Suddenly, he hears the pigman fall from the sky. Even with Heinkel at his side, the impact incapacitates them both. The traitor, however, takes the brunt of the damage. His spine was reportedly broken so badly that he could not lift his head. Still, he can hear the sounds of combat, most likely Yae fighting the pigman. Once again, he bites down on the emergency pill. He hears and sees Heinkel panicking again over the fake fireball. Aldebaran has long stopped trying to warn him, knowing he will not listen. Instead, Aldebaran focuses on finding a place to take cover from the inevitable attack. After his last loop, he knows neither the air nor the ground offers safety. Aldebaran is on loop number 73. He has tried everything to escape the pigman, but fails every time. He has even tried fleeing far from the battlefield, but that failed too. He deduces that someone must be exposing his location and informing Doltero. He tried negotiating with the pigman, but Doltero only mocked him and made it clear that he had no intention of talking. Aldebaran hated opponents like this, those who left no room for negotiation, because it meant he would have to die more times than usual. Even worse, Doltero was so determined that he didn't care about losing a limb. As long as he had 2 legs and 1 arm, he could finish the job. While thinking of how to survive, he was found again by Doltero. Even though Aldebaran used Rachens as a human shield, Doltero did not care and attacked anyway. It is said that just before he died, Aldebaran saw Rachens writhing in pain after being hit by friendly fire. Heinkel throws Aldebaran in the opposite direction of the white smoke. Aldebaran is carrying Yae, who is hanging by his only arm. They swing between the trees using Yae's steel wires. They inevitably entered the smoke's range, but avoided inhaling it. They only breathed when their swing lifted them briefly above the fog. But even with all these concerns, the effects of the smoke started to kick in. And since Aldebaran has terrible luck, that's exactly when they're attacked by someone hurling stones at their position. The traitor quickly creates a stone wall to block the impact. But as more rocks keep coming their way, Yae gives him one final push, throwing him with all her strength toward his destination. Nevertheless, someone continued to throw rocks at Aldebaran's location. Now off balance, he could barely summon a weak wall to protect himself. This flimsy wall was said to be no more helpful than a blanket against the oncoming blows. In this weakened state, he finally arrived at the end of the path, where he met Rom, the man commanding the 500 soldiers. The old man told him that coming here at the cost of his allies' lives was a poor gamble. Rom also informs Aldebaran that Felt is not in the area, meaning there is no chance of capturing the enemy leader as a hostage. Then Gaston appeared and, with a single strike, knocked down and seriously injured Aldebaran. Acting on instinct, Aldebaran reaches for the pill again. However, due to the amount of smoke he inhaled earlier, he nearly vomits up the poison. Rom might be a clever strategist, but there's no way he could have accounted for something like this with the smoke. With that lingering doubt in mind, Aldebaran feels his blood start to boil. The narration pauses briefly to shift the focus to Rom, who is said to have intentionally made the white smoke only mildly irritating, even though he could have made it more intense. This was because there was always a risk that Aldebaran might use the smoke to his advantage. Rom managed to generate a steady stream of wind using magical tools. This wind carried the toxic smoke according to his will. Then, he deployed his forces at key positions. Although 500 men were insufficient to cover the entire forest, it was more than enough once the area had been reduced by the smoke barrier. Rom was grateful for this emergency situation. It was the perfect opportunity for his granddaughter to achieve something significant on her own, without relying on Reinhard. He felt bad about the knight's situation with the witch, of course, but his priority was Felt. As a man with one foot in the grave, he wants to ensure that someone will protect his granddaughter after he is gone. If that means making Felt queen, then he will crown her himself. However, to do so, he must awaken a part of himself that he suppressed long ago. You see, Rom was not always called Rom. In the past, he was known as Valga Cromwell, a demi-human who once sought the downfall of the human race, believing them to be inferior. Back then, he allied with other dangerous figures of the era, even a witch. He served as the strategist of his faction during those days and used his intellect to strike devastating blows against humanity. Although he was eventually captured and imprisoned, there was little reason to believe the giant would ever change. Time passed, and no one knows exactly what or how it happened. However, it is likely that raising Felt from birth softened Valga Cromwell's view of humanity. His granddaughter knows that Valga Cromwell, now called Rom, has a past he is not proud of. However, she does not press him for answers. She is willing to wait until he chooses to share it. Rom feels no pride in his dark past. However, if he can use the same strategies he once employed to destroy humanity to support his granddaughter, he will gladly do so. He may still be a fool in some ways, but the current Valga Cromwell is far wiser than the foolish Valga Cromwell who lost the ancient war. This will be a battle of wits between me and that bastard in the helmet, he thought. After trapping Ratchins and his group in a web of threads, Aldebaran orders his subordinates to search the captured men's belongings. He is certain they possess a method to communicate with Rom and believes the old man is relaying his position to his troops through a communication mirror, a device that allows long-distance contact somewhat like a video call. Remember that wars are won through the speed of information. As long as Aldebaran does not cut off the source of updates, he will not be able to gain control of the situation. The traitor checks Ratchin's belongings and finds the communication mirror. However, his grin fades when he realizes that every soldier present is also carrying one. These devices are extremely useful, but also very expensive, so it's unthinkable that every soldier could afford one. Aldebaran concludes that only one of the mirrors works, and the others are decoys. He immediately curses the old man for using such a dirty tactic. Suddenly, he hears Ratchins mocking him. Aldebaran holds back his anger and simply resigns himself to taking the pill. He knows the pigman always appears after one of Ratchin's insults. He feels his blood begin to boil as he continues cursing Rom. We see Ratchins getting captured again. This time, Aldebaran spots the real mirror right away and destroys it, ignoring the fakes. Ratchins complains that it's unfair he found the real one on the first try. Frustrated, he snaps when Heinkel asks Aldebaran if he's planning to kill them all. You see, Ratchins is not just any citizen. Although he ended up a slacker from the slums, he actually comes from a noble family. He left home because he could not stand the environment or the heavy expectations placed on him. Despite his poor relationship with his father, the man was well regarded as a model citizen. Ratchins disliked Reinhard. He hated him, in fact. Not because Reinhard was a bad person, but simply because he could not tolerate him. His aversion only deepened when he learned that Reinhard struggled emotionally due to his relationship with his father figure. He saw his own family issues reflected in the red-haired knight. Ratchins couldn't understand why Reinhard was so upset over such a pathetic father. So, for once, he decided to do Reinhard a favor by eliminating the source of his anguish. He created another trap spell. Just as he had once disguised a weak spell as a powerful one, he now disguised a highly potent fireball as a low-level spell. Though it appeared small and unimpressive, it was the strongest kind of magic permitted by the schools of sorcery. He did not care that casting this spell caused his mana gate to break apart because it far exceeded his level. He just wanted to teach those two fools who underestimated everyone else a lesson. It is said that the area's temperature began to rise like hellfire. Heinkel mocked the small flame, shattering it with the tip of his sword. This made Ratchins smile. He knew the hell that would soon be unleashed. When he felt his body being consumed by flames, he realized he no longer cared when his life had fallen apart. It no longer mattered. At least he would die achieving his final goal. Then Aldebaran intervened, saying that, while it was an impressive spell, he could not allow it. As if he knew exactly what would happen next, he moved his hands and extinguished the spell's source. Aldebaran thought it was over, but Ratchins tried to cast the spell again. Aldebaran beat him down to stop him, but it was useless. Ratchins kept chanting. Even after Aldebaran hit him in the vital points, Ratchins would not stop. Yai stepped in and asked Aldebaran if she should decapitate Ratchins and let him die a heroic death. The traitor screamed at her to shut up while listening to the battered Ratchins mock him and call him an idiot. It took smashing his head with a stone gauntlet to finally knock Ratchins unconscious and stop the chanting. This stubbornness seemed to strike a nerve in Aldebaran. You see, the traitor has died tried many times, and ironically, believes he understands the value of life. He can afford to take risks due to his ability, but others cannot. Therefore, he could not understand why someone like Rachens would risk his one and only life just to achieve a goal. He thought it was foolish to gamble one's life away like that. Then he hears Doltero's entrance line, but this time, the punch does not follow. Finally, Aldebaran has found a new variable. He decides to update his save point. Another scene change occurs, and this time, we get a closer look at Rom, who notices that Rachens' mirror has been destroyed. He immediately orders the nearest unit, Doltero's squad, to assist him. Rom thinks back on what happened, and realizes how unusual it was that Aldebaran dismantled his strategy on the first try. Understandably, he suspects an information network informing Rachens, but discovering the correct communication mirror among so many decoys and breaking it right away wasn't normal. Thanks to his long life and contact with an ancient witch, Rom knows there are powers in the world beyond imagination and his wildest dreams. He understands that those who lost to such powers did so because they failed to account for the irrational. However, he may be one of the few people to face this situation with prior knowledge. Therefore, he changes his strategy and sends a message to his troops announcing a change of plans. Now we hear a conversation between Al and Doltero. The pigman reportedly has multiple lacerations across his body, caused by being tightly bound with steel threads. Many rounds of binding were needed to properly restrain him. Aldebaran is shocked that Doltero remains completely unfazed by his injuries, showing no reaction to pain or even the prospect of death. This sparks an argument between the traitor and the pigman. Aldebaran tells Doltero that even if he isn't afraid of death, he must still feel pain. Doltero replies that, nonetheless, a living being must conceal that fear. With those words, he finally collapses, followed by his men. We're told that the threads had stopped the flow of blood to Doltero's brain, causing him to fall to his knees. He was so proud that even in defeat, his body never touched the ground. Instead, he fell on his own fist. To defeat him, Aldebaran had to borrow Yai's steel thread weapon and train himself to wield it expertly over 20,000 loops. In this loop, number 23,008, he finally defeats Doltero with this honed skill. Heinkel, who had watched the entire battle, asked what was going on. He just couldn't understand how Aldebaran could defeat someone who was so much better than him. Yai responds that Aldebaran can do it because he's a monster among monsters. Aldebaran reaffirms once again that he doesn't want to kill anyone, but announces that they will now finish off the rest of Felt's camp. Rom reflects on Doltero's defeat and regrets it. He comments that if the pigman had been born just 10 years earlier, he would have left his mark on the history of the demi-human war. Immediately afterward, he orders his men to use a stone that can dispel the night. Why? Because Rom has ruled out every possible explanation for Aldebaran's seemingly unnatural abilities. For now, he suspects that someone in the skies might be feeding Aldebaran information. Turning night into day makes it harder for anyone outside the zone to watch, thus canceling out the idea of a spy in the sky. However, this clever trick turns out to be useless. Aldebaran still manages to find the real mirrors among his soldiers, even after Rom ordered his men to rotate who carried the device at regular intervals. As an extra precaution, Rom had asked them to switch from verbal to written reports. Rom did all this thinking Aldebaran might be able to read minds, or at least see into them. Now that these measures have failed, Rom decides to test another theory. He wants to rule out whether Aldebaran is being aided by a great spirit. Great spirits are beings made of mana. While they come in many tiers, they typically begin as quasi-spirits and evolve into full spirits, like Puck, Amelia's guardian. These powerful beings sometimes choose to serve humans. Although the man in the helmet has shown no signs of having one, the chance isn't zero, so Rom needs to eliminate that possibility as well. But before he can do that, there's one more thing he needs to test, whether Aldebaran has one or more divine protections. In the world of ReZero, divine protections are blessings granted by an unknown force. They offer specific advantages, such as enhancing sword skills or giving someone the power to bend others' wills with their thoughts. To confirm this, Rom orders 2 squads of soldiers to attack in a specific manner. One group throws magic-infused stones, and the other throws normal ones. By observing Aldebaran's reaction, Rom intends to determine if he's protected by a divine blessing, and if so, which one. Rom chooses this method because it has worked for him in the past. He was once known as the man who killed more users of divine protections than anyone else during the war for a reason. We switch back to Aldebaran's perspective. He's more on edge than ever. It has suddenly become harder to identify the person carrying the real mirror because the holder keeps changing. If he arrives even a few seconds late, the role may have already rotated, rendering all the intel from his previous loops useless. Furthermore, none of the soldiers attacking him intend to kill him. Because of that, he can't bring himself to retaliate seriously. If only they were trying to kill him. He'd have an excuse to fight back hard and incapacitate them. However, since he doesn't know if they're serious, he's unsure if updating his save point is a good idea. What if things get worse? With so many strange tactics being used against him, he fears he might have been poisoned. To be sure, he must redo every attempt, fighting each soldier and taking care to avoid contact. Once again, he curses the old man, Rom. The old war strategist updated his intel with each defeated soldier and destroyed Mirror of Aldebaran. In the next phase of his plan, he ordered a large number of mana stones to be piled up in order to contaminate the surrounding mana. If the man in the helmet was being aided by a spirit, the mana poisoning would repel it. He was grateful that he had taken the time in the past to identify each of Reinhardt's divine protections. This experience broadened his knowledge of divine protections, enabling him to confirm that Aldebaran did not possess any. Having ruled out the possibility of a watcher in the sky, a spirit companion, and divine protections, the only remaining possibility was the existence of an authority, a power that allows its wielder to rewrite reality itself. Aldebaran was more stressed than ever. He had figured out that Rom had ordered these irregular attack patterns to determine the nature of his ability. This didn't surprise him. In one of his earlier battles, he had faced someone sharp enough to guess that he had a power like that. Perhaps the most intelligent people in this world can really infer what his ability is. Still unsure if he should update his save point, he kept dying over and over again to reach the optimal outcome. He couldn't help but wonder why the greatest human killer in history was now helping a little human girl. After much trial and error, he's finally certain. Aldebaran is twisting reality at will. He knows this because he once allied with a witch who lamented being a failed recreation, a flawed imitation incapable of replicating an authority that could distort reality. Not ruling out the possibility that Aldebaran can read minds, he orders 2 soldiers to attack him, but gives them different commands. One is told to run past him while the other is told to attack seriously. The plan was to test whether Aldebaran could truly read minds, but the man in the helmet attacked the soldier who wasn't planning to fight. So that possibility is eliminated. He deduces that Aldebaran knows about future events, so he suspects that Aldebaran has the authority of precognition. However, he remembers the witch telling him that these kinds of powers distort the laws of reality, meaning precognition might not be the correct classification. He wonders how he is supposed to deal with someone like this. Aldebaran has reached the last remaining unit of soldiers, led by Gaston. He has already received Rom's warning. Aldebaran can see the future. Gaston prepares to greet him with a rapid flurry of strikes, hoping to overwhelm him before he can plan for so many variables. However, the traitor simply erects a stone wall, cutting off Gaston's momentum and stunning him. Then, he strikes with gauntlets made of the same material. Gaston refuses to give in. Predicting Aldebaran's next move, he leaps back with a spinning kick aimed at his rival's helmet. Suddenly, his leg stops mid-air. Aldebaran had trapped him with steel thread and asked Heinkel to incapacitate him. Reinhardt's father approaches, his face clearly showing that he is only doing this out of duty and because he has no choice. This angered Gaston. Driven by sheer will, Gaston punches Heinkel and uses the momentum to break free from the threads, even if it completely destroys his ankle. He doesn't care. He aims to land a hit on Aldebaran but stumbles due to his injured leg. The traitor can't understand why Gaston is pushing himself so hard with that injured leg, but Gaston tells him he doesn't care about the state of his leg. He's putting his life on the line, and this isn't the kind of fight he can walk away from just because he's in a little pain. What bothers him the most, though, is that it feels like neither Aldebaran nor Heinkel even want to fight. It's like they're just doing this out of obligation. He can't wrap his head around how some people get involved in things like this without appreciating the efforts of their comrades, and without a strong reason behind it. Because unlike them, he does have plenty of reasons to give it his all right now. Gaston had a woman he loved, a woman who trembled in fear when she heard about the villain who controls the nation's dragon and threatens the world, and yet she held him tight, told him not to worry, and sent him off to battle with Felt. Gaston had friends he looked up to, a friend who complained about everything and everyone, but secretly cared deeply for those around him. A lifelong friend who, despite being a coward at heart, never backed down so far as to abandon his comrades to their fate. a mentor who was always lecturing him with long, complicated sermons, but who was kind and truly believed that everyone had the right to achieve greatness. Someone who had a dark past and was a bad influence, but who loved his little granddaughter with all his heart and didn't care about turning the curse of his past into strength if it was for her. Gaston had a man and a woman he admired, a man so incredibly strong he could protect everything Gaston wished he could protect, and a woman so radiant that no matter where he went, forgetting her would be impossible. Gaston had many reasons to stand up and keep fighting, so, ignoring the state of his body, he rises again, and he tells Aldebaran he has no right to be here, where others give their all when he himself doesn't. Then, he charges at him with a punch so powerful that even if the traitor blocked it with his stone walls, it would break through anything in its path. If it landed, it would shatter that helmet. But Aldebaran closes the gap in an instant and lands a counter that completely nullifies Gaston's final effort. He congratulates him, saying his punch truly achieved what it aimed for. Gaston was thinking about the weird things Aldebaran said, and right before he loses consciousness, he sees a flash of white light, followed by a shout. It was Camberly, the one wielding Echidna's staff, a magical tool capable of unleashing an attack powerful enough to trouble even a dragon. However, it came at a steep cost. It consumed an enormous amount of mana. To compensate for his lack of it, Camberly used a hexel, a drug that causes mana to overflow in its user temporarily and sends them into a frenzy. This way, he managed to overcome his mana deficiency and cast the spell in an attempt to defeat Aldebaran. Naturally, using a spell of that magnitude came with serious consequences for his body, but that didn't matter to him. His friends, Rachins and Gaston, had risked their lives, and he had to do the same out of respect for them and their friendship. Aldebaran admitted it was impossible to avoid getting hit by that attack. No matter how many things he put between himself and the spell, it always managed to land. So, he had no choice but to use Heinkel's unusually tough body to take the hit in his place and survive the impact. He discovered this solution in loop number 29,221. Camberly didn't care. He was ready to fire again, but before he could, he collapsed from mana exhaustion. With no mana reserves left, the staff triggered a penalty. His body had been pushed so far that smoke was seen rising from his mana gate, and blood poured from his eyes and nose. He immediately lost consciousness, but was tended to by his girlfriend, Toto, who rushed to give him first aid. When Aldebaran turned his back, she tried to attack him, but was stopped by Yai. Now that the final battalion had been defeated, there was only one thing left to do: walk the final path and face the mastermind behind it all, Old Man Rom. They have a quick exchange. Aldebaran asks Rom how old he is, but Rom says he stopped counting after turning 100. It turns out that Rom is one of the giants, the same giants who got into trouble with an old witch long ago. Aldebaran also mentions how dragons were hunted almost to extinction by one swordsman, and how the witch Minerva died because of the Witch of Envy. Rom's amazed and says that for a young guy, Aldebaran really knows a lot about stuff that happened 400 years ago. Then he tells him off for killing 500 soldiers. Aldebaran just says that even if that's true, it's still fewer than the lives Rom took when he was Valga Cromwell. The old man falls silent, but then he starts to say something. He says he always thought it was weird that Aldebaran never kills his enemies. He can understand sparing regular soldiers, but he finds it odd that he hasn't eliminated key fighters like Ezo or Garfield. So he concludes that Aldebaran avoids killing because he can't bear to watch another person die in front of him. He can't stand to see another death like Priscilla's. Now it's Aldebaran's turn to fall silent. And in that silence, Valga tells him that Felt isn't there. And even though it might sound a bit ironic, he's actually grateful to Aldebaran for sparing his army. He's thankful because now, with Hexel's support, he can bring them back. Maybe not all of them, but at least 100. So he asks Aldebaran to defeat them all again. But this time, it won't be so simple because this army, reawakened by the drug, won't feel fear. They won't even feel any pain. Then, all of a sudden, the soldiers are all around him again. Aldebaran panics and yells out in desperation that it doesn't matter. He'll just have to beat them all again. It's because of this unusual outburst that Valga realizes this is his first encounter with the bastard in the helmet. With a grin, he tells the traitor he just confirmed it. This is the first time they're speaking. Aldebaran feels a chill run down his spine and realizes that the man in front of him is a greater threat than even the Sword Saint himself, the strongest man in the world. The traitor senses the danger and orders Yai to get ready to attack the old strategist. But before she can act, she's incapacitated by Manfred, a man with a strange eye. He's the one who's been tracking Aldebaran's position the whole time, and with his other eye, he takes Yai down with nothing but his words. It seems like his words have some kind of power over people. But Yae manages to break free, only to be taken down by Gracis, who's out for revenge for her younger sister's defeat at Aldebaran's hands. The traitor knows his allies are out of commission, but he decides to update his save point before taking on Valga. Valga takes the drug, and his body starts growing. In a flash, he hits Aldebaran with his huge arm. Then Heinkel shouts and points to the sky. The dragon Alcanica has arrived. Aldebaran is happy to see his ally, but Valga isn't concerned. Actually, it looks like he's been waiting for this. Right away, he smashes another magic stone, the same one that made it look like daytime at night and blocked the sky from view. He did all this because he had a plan, you see. After doing some analysis, he realized that Aldebaran doesn't actually see the future. He just knows what's going to happen, and then goes back in time to a point before the event to make the best decisions based on that knowledge. It's hard to believe that he could literally see the future, since the present is made up of so many variables. It's not realistic to think that everything would unfold the same way each time. Because he had to fight Reinhard, Valga is pretty sure that Aldebaran doesn't have much time to redo things. Otherwise, he would have avoided fighting him altogether, and he wouldn't be in this situation now. If this wild time reset theory is true, it would explain how Aldebaran managed to do everything he's done up until now. The pieces fit really well. Valga wished he had better luck, but at least he knew how to handle the situation now. As unfair as this power is, it also has a fatal flaw that could be exploited. Aldebaran would probably try to save at a time that seems good for him. Valga just had to make a fake safe zone, one that was actually full of traps. Since the dragon had returned and all they needed now was a show of overwhelming power to end the war, he used Hexel to alter the illusion from the magic stone. He made it seem like the spot where he and the traitor were standing was just an empty area surrounded by soldiers. The plan was simple. The dragon would set the area on fire to show its might and crush the enemy's morale. What it wouldn't know is that it would actually be attacking Aldebaran, right after he had updated his save point. The traitor realizes Valga's true intention, and he tries to flee, but Valga grabs him by the leg and holds him in place. This was a plan Valga never got to use in the war against humanity, but his current self finally had the means to pull it off. The dragon starts attacking, and Rom can't help but think about his cute little granddaughter. As memories come flooding in, he doesn't see battlefields or comrades, only her. He sees her as a baby, as a little girl, and finally, as the woman she's become. He's got a strange smile on his face. He always wondered if his life would flash before his eyes at the moment of death, but this is so much better. Curiously, not once does the face of a fallen comrade cross his mind, those who couldn't escape death as he did. As Rom is swept away by these memories, he and Aldebaran are engulfed by the dragon's breath. But at the last second, someone shows up. With the witch's staff in hand, she strikes and diverts the dragon's jaw, causing the flames to veer off course. It's felt. She won't let her beloved foster father die in a self-sacrificial move to catch the enemy. Valga Cromwell's plan failed because of the feelings of his precious granddaughter. And that's where today's video ends. To be honest, this is the longest narration I've ever done. I had to reread 3 whole episodes of the novel for this, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider leaving a like and a comment. A simple comment might not seem like a big deal, but it can make the difference between a low-view video and a successful one. But tell me, what did you think of the fight between Valga Cromwell and Aldebaran?